Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Good.
As you can see, I'm on the move at the moment. So
Okay.
needed to get out of the shadow of Tulse Hill. Because if you know anything about Tulse Hill, no signal, no nothing,
No problem.
nothing.
I mean, I was sitting
Okay.
here crying and I was like, wow, I've actually been stood up. But it's all good. At least I know I wasn't stood up. It's all good.
Right. Catch that again.
I
You were
thought you stood.
crying.
Yeah, I thought you stood me up. I thought you weren't coming.
No, not me. Sorry, it's just the NEXUS Talks. Unfortunately, it's an issue, and it's one of them ones where you have to. Although I would want to do this at home and do it chilling, I've actually got so much to do that
Yeah,
I have it's on the move. But
no
I'll find
problem.
a nice spot for us to have that chat, and it will be absolutely cool. What's going on over
Awesome.
there?
You just finding somewhere to sit?
So say that again.
Did you say you're finding somewhere to sit?
Yeah, finding
Okay, no
somewhere quiet.
problem. Just let me know
Yeah.
when you're ready.
Um, yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome. Hello, it's nice to online meet you. How are you doing? As I said, I missed you before. I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Hold on 1 second. Right, let's get the camera. That's not a really good angle, is it? That's a better
This is
angle.
a good angle. The lighting's better there.
Yeah.
Hi,
So,
everyone.
yeah,
I'm
likewise, a pleasure.
Deana, by the way. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
So, are you ready to be grilled?
Yes, I'm ready to be grilled.
No, I'm only joking. I'm actually really excited to talk to you. Obviously, for anyone who's watching who isn't sure who Eddie is a photographer, educator, and curator. So I'd love for you to tell people that are listening a bit more about yourself and about your career.
Yeah, I think I went professional maybe 96, 93. And when I say professional, I mean like, you put in your first invoice and you get paid. So that's the start of my sort of photography in that regard. I think the first shoot I did in that way was a rapper called J. Rue the Damager. Because what I'd done throughout my youth was just basically sort of stalk rappers, just literally find out where they are and take pictures of them and put them in context. I was trying to collect my favorite MCs, my favorite artists, my favorite DJs, my favorite entertainers, and I was trying my best to put them in context.
Yeah.
So that's where it begun, and I haven't looked back since. I've just basically done that and tried to get involved in anything that's creative or anything that inspires me in order to keep my mind fresh, keep my world fresh, and keep my world outlook fresh. So it's been a journey more than anything.
Yeah.
So that's the fun part of it.
How easy was it to stalk rappers back then? Obviously now I feel like it's quite easy to stalk people. How difficult was
Yeah,
it?
I mean, yeah, I suppose in a way it's a similar sort of thing, but I think for hip hop back then, certainly, you'd buy. Most people would put out their records themselves, and then you would find yourself looking on the back of the record, and you'd see a telephone number, and generally you could pick up the phone and call that number and find out what they're up to, and say, "Yo, my name's so and so. I'm from London, and either I'm coming out to New York, or next time you're in London, let me know." And you sort of track them down to their hotels, you track them down to the venues. You hang out. You're there for the culture, but you're also there for their genius. For their ability to put ideas, tell their stories, and my role I felt was to complement that story and try and give them imagery that I felt reflected where their artistry was coming from.
Yeah.
And I still feel that way now.
Yeah, that's so cool. And is it that you fell in love with hip hop and that's what made you pick up the camera, or did you pick up the camera first? Like, what order did it come in?
I think it comes with a camera first. My life, the camera. I can remember the first time I took a picture. Maybe I must have been like 6 or 7 years old, and I remember the way the light was coming through the window, and I remember the whole thing. And I remember the sort of pressing that button, and that was it. That was the one shot you have. And then, obviously, years later, when I could get hold of a camera myself, it was documenting my world and my trainers, my friends, everything around me, and also the things you love, which is then hip hop. So I suppose the camera came first, and then hip hop. came with the culture. You know, like I suppose I grew up right into hip hop. You know, like from '85 onwards. Yeah, it was there. It was part of the culture. It was part of being in primary school and coming out at lunchtime and asking the teachers for a lino so you could body pop throughout lunchtime and dance. That's what the culture means. You know, it was all encompassing.
Yeah.
So yeah, beautiful thing.
Oh, that's so cool. And like, I actually know and really appreciate how much skill it takes to be a photographer, because I pick up a phone and I don't see anything. I just snap something, and I can see other people that can really translate some beautiful pictures. And when I was researching, I noticed something on your website, and you said that you shoot first, ask questions later, and you're all about finding the truth. How do you stay authentic like that? Because I feel nowadays all the pictures I see are so fake. I feel like everything's really, really fake. How do you stay authentic and make sure you're always showing the truth, like you're always saying that you are?
Well, I think fundamentally to do that, you have to shoot on film. I think fundamentally, because, you know, it's what's trapped on that film is indelible. Like from the moment you press the shutter to what gets captured, it can't be altered. You know, it's a physical material, and so you can only adjust it so much. You can think about the light, or you can crop it, but really what you see is what you get with film. With digital, it's a slightly different story. Don't get me wrong, you can still Photoshop a real picture, but in 100 years' time, you're not going to find my hard drive, and you're not going to find my Instagram account. What you will find is a box of prints or a bag of negatives in my loft, and that's where you'll see the truth. Yeah. You know, it's all there. You know, it's not. It's the negative doesn't lie. It's there. This is where the idea that photography is the truth comes from. It comes from the negative. But we don't live in that world, as you said. We have this push button universe. But I believe in 100 years' time we'll see who's telling the truth and who's not. You know, because the truth will come out regardless. You know, whatever it is, whatever that reality is.
Yeah.
So that's the real challenge for me, and the challenge is also for me to train people to use film in that way as a way of telling your own truth, even if you're paid to take pictures digitally and retouch everything because that's what the client wants.
Yeah, exactly. Do you get a lot of pushback when, you know, like you're training people, or if you're saying I'd rather do film photography rather than digital? Do you get much pushback?
Yeah, I used to. It used to be really, really difficult. Now it's slightly different because I think film's cool again.
Yeah.
It still feels like when I do reach pushback, certainly from certain clients that I'm trying to teach and trying to share my knowledge with, then I kind of shouldn't really be working with them because they only want a quick fix. They don't really want to see any sort of long-term results, you know. And also it means that they're not going to engage in a full process for me, which is, you know, it's about your relationship to the negative, your relationship to the camera, and your relationship to the print, because ultimately your truth, it has to be done on paper, which then gets stuck on a wall. So if I'm teaching and they can't do that for their students, then they can't do anything for them anyway. So find someone else, you know, like do whatever you need to do, but don't involve me, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about staying true to your niche as well, if that's what you love. Like I can just imagine getting a lot of pushback, because in the industry, as you said, it's all like quick fix and it's all touch-ups and it's all fake. And so I can imagine that. When was it in the hardest in your career? When did you feel like you were getting the most pushback?
I think it must have been between sort of 2005 to 2015 when everything went digital. You know, vinyl went missing, everything, grime died, you know, like before it got resurrected again. Just everything was just dead. Everyone's like, oh, we can do it cheaper, we can do it digitally, we can do this. And to a certain extent, I couldn't really, when grime died its first death before it resurrected again a few years later, I fell off with that. I was like, right, it's all done. And so I moved into other things. But then, as you well saw, grime came back. Garage didn't come back. Jungle came back. All the core things that are London as a city, as a culture produced in its youth culture, sort of came back. And that's when I felt like I came back with it. Film came back. Vinyl came back. Grime came back. And that feels to me something that was worth celebrating, and something that I'll say that if something disappears and comes back, then it's back for good. You know, it is. You know, if you can do that, if you can fall off a tree or fall off your career and do a Mark Morrison, just disappear for 20 years, but still come back, you're back for good. Nothing can take it away from you.
Yeah.
Because it's like, say, making your first million is the hardest, you know?
Yeah. What would you say to creators then that are facing pushbacks now? Because obviously what's happening with Corona, work is maybe harder to find. How did you stay motivated and keep pushing through when you felt those kind of drawbacks and pushbacks?
Well, I kind of, in the part of me, had to sort of look at myself as not like a paid jobbing worker, but more like an artist. You know, I do this for the culture. I do this for the upliftment of our people. You know, young people, young black folk. You know, it's for the culture. This is why we do what we do. Money doesn't really. It's not about the money. It never was about the money. The money will come if you're good. You know, if you go chasing the money, it's not a good look. It's not good for you. You know, you'll find yourself getting ill very quickly. So it allowed me to, it certainly allowed me to think of myself as someone who exists outside of time, you know, outside of any kind of bills that need to be paid, someone who exists outside of that, and therefore I can see beyond it. And, you know, things get better. It's not a one-way street. Life does improve, but you've got to stay focused on what you find, what gives you solace and what gives you peace, you know?
Yeah.
And that's really the core of it, I think. But like I said, I've gone through ups and downs, so I'm not really fazed by anything anymore. And also, everyone has their own personal recessions. Like the recession in the world, it doesn't reflect what's going on in your bank account.
Yeah.
It reflects, you know, sometimes we exist outside of that. The world could be doing really well and making trillions of dollars, but you ain't got a penny in your pocket. Whereas middle of COVID, I could be doing better than I've ever done. You know, these things aren't a given. You've just got to keep seeing and throwing your energy forward. There's a couple of projects I started years ago that have started paying off this year. And that's basically the fashion stuff where I'm licensing, I'm creating the means to basically put my work out there so people can buy T-shirts with my work on it, and that did really well. Certainly in America, certainly through Urban Outfitters, I found a really good outlet for my photography and for my artistry as well, because I believed in the icon people, i.e. Aaliyah, Biggie, like these human souls, these amazing artists, and how since they passed and since they're with God and so on, that they are a way and a route to another higher force. And why not wear that on your shirt? Why not use that iconography to really uplift yourself, you know? And it's a very Christian way of thinking of things, but I learned from all religious groups that, yeah, the icon is a real thing, and the icon means, you know, someone who is literally a route to God. And although that's sort of like a spiritual way of looking at it, I feel like we come from a spiritual world, even if we don't believe in any kind of religious system. It's still a good way of allowing to test the concept, to say, okay, I'm going to put these icons on T-shirts, and you're going to buy into it, and channel that spirit into your world. You know, whether it's the voice of Aaliyah or the spirit of Biggie or the vibe or the energy of old DB. I still believe in the longevity of the photograph after someone's life, and I believe in that for everybody. Even some of the projects I do now, where I'm photographing families when new families, when the baby's 100 days old, I always insist to do a family portrait, because 20 years later, you don't know what's going to happen. And that moment needs to be recorded and captured and be there forever. You know, in terms of the materials I use, like it's on film or on paper, it's there forever.
Yeah.
That's the hope anyway.
Yeah, that was so passionate then. I really felt what you were saying then. I can tell that like there's still so much fire in you, and that you still really, really love what you're doing, which is so amazing to see.
Yeah, I feel blessed in a way. Certainly this year made me realise how blessed I am, because, as I said, I feel like my life exists outside of the times that we're in, or the news, or what triggers us. I feel like my life is my own, and I can do what I need to do as long as I do right, you know. Yeah. And from what I've stood so far, photography is my tool. And I can share that with other people. And even if photography isn't a career choice for you, it should be a part of your life. It should be the way you remember people. It should be the way you remember your moments. It should be something that's there for your future people to look at yourself and look at what you've been doing and what you created while you were here. Because it's not a given. Nothing's a given. But our creativity sometimes can outlive us, you know?
Yeah, it's so true, especially with what's happening now. There is nothing that's certain anymore. I think that's like showed everyone that this whole life of planning and I'm going to do this on this day and do that on this day and missing all the small moments. I think Corona's woken up a lot of people. So I'm completely with you on that. I wanted to ask you, obviously you've taken shots with some amazing rappers. Who has been your favourite shot or your most memorable?
I think they've all been amazing in many different ways, but I think I always come back to Method Man, just because he reminded me that a rapper in the purest 90s sense of the word can only be one thing, and that's it themselves. You know, that they are these super beings, they are these super characters. They don't put it on. They sound like that, they walk like that, they rap like that. That's the whole estate they grew up on has created that being, you know? And so Method Man was like the first time I saw that as being a full 360 MC. Like, there's nothing else on this earth that he could do apart from be a rapper. You know, he might consider himself an actor or other things, but the reality is you are what you are. You are Mr. Meth, you are Iron Lung, you are every pseudonym you've given yourself and every lyric you've ever spat, you are that, you know? And so I feel like, and that was my defining, that's when I knew an MC or I knew a rapper when I met one, when they were like the full package. You know, there's no half, you know, you hear him a mile away, like you hear him, you know, when he talks like he's rhyming, you know, like you can see it in people like Busta Rhymes and certain rappers of that generation who literally, from the day they popped out to when, you know, to puberty, to everything, they just got better at being themselves. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like that. I kind of love that. I love people that are themselves. I love that. I feel like you've really done well to do that because everything is trying to tell you to be somebody else, you know?
100%, especially when it comes to creative field. Obviously, like, I don't know how similar photography and being a presenter is, but you're always trying to be molded. They're like, what's your niche? You have to be one specific thing, and it's really difficult to express all the different parts of you. So I felt that completely. So I read something that I want to ask you, Eddie. I heard that you've obviously you're still doing what you're doing, but you've moved on to kind of Sussex and you're doing some rural photography. As someone who lives in Sussex and thinks Sussex is the most deadest place in the world, I want to ask you, where did that come from? Where did this switch come from?
Well, a couple of years back, I think it was K. Tempest, the poet, the great poet, was invited to do a project at, sorry, I'm just sitting at a train station, the train just pulled in, it's got the most beautiful piece going all the way down the side of it, and I want to run out there and photograph it, but anyway.
Sorry.
It happens, it's like the one day you're actually at a train station, you see a train pulled in with a brand new piece of art on there, which obviously some kid has stayed up all night to do. And by tomorrow it'll be buffed off anyway. But Tempest had this project in Brighton, and she invited me to join in, and I set up a dark room down in Brighton called the Bright Rooms. And it was soon after I finished running this workshop at this place on the White Oak Estate in some boxing club that I walked out of the workshop, and I was walking back to Brighton, but I took the wrong turn, and I walked up a hill and then over the downs, and then I saw a countryside that I'd never seen before. I'd never really sort of taken in, like, all right, there's a countryside. You know, like, I'm a city boy. I grew up in South London. That's all I know. Yeah. And to sort of encounter this environment allowed me to really just think twice about what's out there, you know, like what's a part of this environment. And so I started with Sussex. I started walking around there. Then Dorset and all the other counties came along. And then I tried Ireland and Scotland and everywhere else, just to see what's outside of this city, because I think certainly when you live in London, you're living in a bubble, basically. Yeah. And you don't realise what other people are going through, even the people in your own sort of nation. And so to experience that and experience the countryside, and also experience the myth of the countryside, the idea that it's beautiful. It's not. It's fucking disgusting. It's horrible what's been done to the countryside. Yeah. Every tree is felled, every forest has been destroyed, and then what's left is just sheep eating up the grass and eating up everything. You know, it's not great. And the lies they tell themselves, you know, like, it's like, hold on, you've got no trees because you built boats. You built boats, so you built an empire. You built an empire. Everything comes with a price, you know, and the price that you've taken upon your own nation is really says it all. The scars in Ireland, to walking through a fjord and coming across a random monument that talks about 180 people that died of starvation only 100 odd years ago, you know, just because they had to go to the Lord Manor and ask him for lunch, and he was too busy, so he was like, fund these people. You know, it allowed me to sort of understand where we're at, really. Exactly. And you're right, Side isn't amazing. Apart from a pub and a couple of sheep, there's not really much popping out there, do you know?
So dead.
It's a vacuum. Sometimes you might come across a really interesting village that sells really interesting cider, but that's about it.
Exactly, there's not much going on. That's why when I read it, I was like, no. And then I kept scrolling and I saw some pictures, like, okay, maybe it's true, but I was like, just interested to see where the switch came from. But you still see the truth in it. Like, you took it back to history and how we're all still treating each other like rubbish. So I kind of get why you might have wanted to switch and see the reality there.
I had to do it. I mean, what I did fall in love with was the animals. You know, I found wild goats in Dorset. They were banging. Like, I saw a couple of alpacas like 3 weeks ago. I was with alpacas in Scotland. They're amazing. You know, it's really, sometimes it's the animals that are really the most intriguing aspect of the countryside. And then the saddest for me is roadkill, the amount of death you see out there, like everything murdered. You know, the trees are so young, the forests are so new, they don't really have much going for them.
Yeah.
And it makes me to think of like the great forests that you may see across the world and how they're going the same way. Once those forests are destroyed, they don't come back.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, England needs to be honest with itself. It destroyed its forests. You know, there's a couple of forests seen, but they're not forests in any real sense of the word. They're just sort of pine trees. You know.
Yeah, I just want to ask you something for the creatives that might be watching. What would you say to people that are considering swapping their niche or trying something new? Because it can be really daunting, especially if you're known for a certain thing. What would your advice be to them? And also, what would your advice be to those that are struggling from this whole corona, this pandemic? What would you say to them to keep going and stay focused on who they are and what they're doing?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one that you need to have a supportive base. You need to have a background, like a family that's supportive of you regardless of what you're doing. You know, like my mum was supportive in that she didn't really question what I was doing. I was doing it anyway. And so, you know, there wasn't any pressure on me to sort of like be anything. I didn't need to be an accountant or a lawyer, you know, so therefore I'm not under that guise. And sometimes I see parents try and do like things like, you know, walk into their kid's room with an application form to Sainsbury's and say, right, get a job, as if to say that's the answer to your problems, and it's not really. It's the beginning of your problems.
Yeah.
Maybe you might do that job for 3 weeks and realise very quickly that you'll never want to work in Sainsbury's again, and therefore you'll start to be more ambitious. But ultimately, you've got to keep moving. You've got to keep scratching. You've got to keep looking, you know. And for me, the camera, regardless of whether you're doing well or not, allows you to see. So, for example, on days where nothing was popping off and no jobs are coming, no phone calls are happening, I'd still pick up my camera and take a bus ride into town and just take my camera out for a walk and photograph things. I may bump into people. I may bump into, who did I bump into that day? I bumped into the guy who runs Supreme. And then we got into a conversation. And then before you know it, one thing leads to another. So you have to sort of keep yourself moving. You have to sort of keep yourself out there to engage with the world and see what the world has to offer you. You know, I'm going to sort of quote the Bible here when it says something about wisdom cries in the streets. And and the Bible describes wisdom as a woman, you know, that it's out there, but you've got to go and find it. So I kept myself busy. I keep myself going to galleries and looking at art and keeping my visual eye sharpened and keen. And with COVID, it's an interesting one. Even with COVID, I was out there. Like, literally, there's a meme that says, so what did you do during COVID 2020? Well, I was like, I shot 75 rolls of film. It's like, boom, I'm a legend. You know, like that. That's exactly what I did. I was out there, and I'm only now starting to post my COVID stories because all it was empty streets in a city that I've lived in all my life, seeing it the way I haven't seen it in years. You know, it used to be this quiet all the time. Now it's back to being quiet again. During the 90s, during the IRA years, London was always quiet. The weekends were dead. So it's just basically keep it moving. Don't stop. keep engaged. Now that people are, just keep it moving. Just keep it moving. And of course, for people who shoot on film, obviously, it's the materials cost money, but you soon find places that sell film really cheap, like Process Supplies, for instance. You learn how to develop film at home in your own way. You want to share that experience with your family so that they get where you're coming from. And it's your family that's going to hook you up with jobs. It's your family going to say, "Oh, your cousin's getting married next week. Why don't you do the shots?" It's about sort of keeping it moving in that way.
Yeah.
And that's all I've asked for, is to still have the health and the strength to keep it moving. And also the other thing I did was like maybe sort of 5 years ago, I went through like a divorce basically. And while that happened, I decided to sort of engage with another world. So I spent a week in a care home staying with a photographer called James Barner, who's currently 91, and just to hear his stories, just to get a context for him, and also to help him out, help sort out his negatives, help just, go shopping with him, just to humble myself.
Yeah.
Just to, and that really did me a massive favor, because for someone who started his photography career he opened a studio in 1945. He would do portraits in the villages of Africa with no electricity, and the same camera that he'd used to take the pictures, the same device that he'd used to make the picture, because old cameras can become enlargers as well. You can do them both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And expose the paper with matches in a tent in a jungle. Boom. This is 1940. So this is how African photographers made their money. And he would say things like, "You know why they call me the king of groups?" I'm like, "Why do they call you the king of groups?" Because I could take a group of 100 people, get every single one of them perfect, and sell the same print 100 times. I'm like, okay, that works. That's why you're the king of groups. Because you understand that you can photograph a big group and make your money on one picture. So it's just like, it's that kind of thinking. And now he's in his 90s, he goes, "Eddie, now my career started. I'm 91 years old, and now I'm going to have a retrospective, and now I'm going to be famous, and now I've got a medal from my government saying that I'm an honorary person. I'm 90 years old. I can't even enjoy this. My back pain's so bad."
Oh.
So it's like, yeah, I feel you, James, but weren't you with Naomi Campbell last week? Yeah.
He's living life.
Yeah, exactly. I'm too old to enjoy it. I was like, "James, I know what you're trying to tell me, but just let it go." You had your kids. It's all right. Don't worry about it.
That new perspective, though, it really does put it into perspective, because as well, like, everyone wants to get rich quick or get famous quick, and it's just, it doesn't work like that.
No, not at all. Because the irony is, you could be famous in your 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And so I needed that just to keep me grounded, just to keep me focused. And the same with COVID as well. I spent a lot of time with my mum just tidying up her paperwork, and I sometimes draw solace from hanging out with old people, because they've seen it. That you've made it. Like, I've gone through like maybe 2 dips so far. Like when your career highs and then you go down, come up and go down. So I kind of expect another 5 or 6 more, really.
Yeah.
And imagine like when you're coming up and you're doing really well, like 2040. You're like, who knew?
Exactly.
Who knew? And the point. That's why I keep saying about the photography that I have, and this is what I say to my photographers, is how do you keep your work alive 20 years down the line? You might have shot it digitally, but that hard drive has to still be working in 20 years' time, because that one portrait you took, a heady one in 2020, may become really important in 2040, and you don't know why. And you still need to share it with a generation of kids that are yet to be born, who don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
And you think you're big now. Come on, the biggest audience you may have are yet to be born. You just got to keep it going until that time comes. So that's a thing in itself,
Perfect.
And certainly for the old boys, as I said, going underneath their beds and finding their history and their lives and their stories, and all locked away in these films, in these boxes, usually always in shoe boxes. That's why I keep all my film in Prada boxes. So everyone will be like, "Oh shit, Prada."
Amazing. Eddie, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I really appreciate it. I just have one final question for you. By now, I'm guessing you've heard Rishi and all the government telling us all to retrain.
Yeah.
Just out of interest, if you were to retrain, what job would you do, or what would your field be?
over lockdown, I took a city lit course in stand-up comedy.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll be out there telling jokes. Like,
You still know how to do that. That's a creative thing. That's not
no,
what
you got
the
to.
government wants.
Comedy's wicked. It helps you out so much for like when you're doing social events and when you're doing parties and stuff. Just because it means that you just work on your gags and work on your character, like because I'll just basically turn up in character. So yeah, but that's what I'll do if I had to retrain. It's like, can you imagine Eddie's gonna come back as a stand-up comic? You know what I mean? Like, you know, what a challenge. Yeah.
I've given you an idea now. You're thinking about it.
Yeah, what I'm looking for, I'll tell you what, I will do the stand-up comedy thing, but what I'm looking for is I want a costume. I want to do a stand-up comedy in a costume, like as Chewbacca or something.
Right.
Like,
Let me hear a joke then.
I don't have a joke, but how many psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know how many.
It only takes one psychotherapist, but the bulb has to want to change.
Oh my god, yeah, no. Let's just stick to photography, Eddie. You're doing great
Yeah, thank you. I will. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Have a good day.